Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Unlocking the Secrets NPS tells you about your district's families. We're excited to have you here today. And before we dive in, I want to share a few housekeeping items. The webinar will be recorded, and you'll receive a copy of that recording along with a copy of the report in a follow-up email. And we also encourage you to introduce yourself using the chat function in Zoom. And we'll use that to answer any questions, share any comments. So feel free to use the chat function throughout the entire webinar. And we'll also be saving some time at the end to answer your questions as well. And now it's my pleasure to hand it over to Krista Coleman, Chief Customer Officer at K-12 Insight.
Thanks, Olivia. Hello, everyone, and welcome. First of all, thank you all for being here today, especially because I know more than anyone what it feels like to try to fit one more thing on your schedule as you're busy preparing for the end of the year right before the holidays. I mean, weren't we all just preparing for back to school? It feels like that was yesterday, and here we are, the holiday season right around the corner. So I know you have a lot on your plates, and there's no pun intended because Turkey Day is next Thursday, right? But I do appreciate so much you joining me and Kate during this type of season. It's just completely appreciative from the K-12 Insight team. I am Krista Coleman. For some of you, you met me on the first webinar, or if you're a customer of ours, you've probably seen me more than your fair share. I'm the Chief Customer Officer here. And I'm also the lady that sent you this invite that added that one thing onto your schedule. But I tell you, you won't regret it. We felt like more than ever getting this information out to you now versus at the beginning of the year could be to your advantage. And one of the additional gifts you're getting from me today is that I have our Senior Director of Research at K-12 Insight, Dr. Kate Shoulders, with us. Kate, you want to come off mute for a minute and just introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, as Krista said, I'm Dr. Kate Shoulders, thrilled to be joining you today and looking forward to sharing hopefully some valuable research nuggets with you. Thanks for having me, Krista.
Yeah, I'm glad you're here. So for those of you joining us for the first time, just to kind of level set everything, in August of this year, K-12 Insight released our inaugural report and hosted a webinar just like we're doing today to launch our quarterly report series, where we explored how often parents actually reach out to you as school districts. And then we really focused during that webinar on how satisfied those parents and families were with the interactions they were having with your district. So you're actually joining us for part 2 of this quarterly report series, where we continue the conversation about the satisfaction that your parents and families have with the interactions they've had with your school district thus far. But also we discussed something really important that we touched on in the last webinar that we're really going into a deeper dive today, which was how school districts can use a measurement called Net Promoter Score, also going to be referred to as NPS throughout this entire discussion today, and how we use that to measure parent satisfaction in school districts. As promised in my email, and as every little engagement that you have gotten up into this webinar, today we're diving deep into the findings from our November report. So our August and now November report is going to dig deeper into how parents and family perceive the interactions with their school district using NPS, the Net Promoter Score. We'll also share insights into the behaviors of the families who are thinking about leaving their school. That's where we're going to really lean on Dr. Shoulders to share a little bit more insight. And then lastly, more importantly, our goal for you today is to walk away from today's webinar knowing how to better understand your customers through NPS, how to measure those perceptions, and then strategies for bringing NPS back to your school district. If after you see this, you're like, Krista, Kate, we need this, we're going to give you a few strategies on how to get that started. So If everybody's good and you're going to give me a thumbs up because I can only see myself and Dr. Shoulders, let's dive in. So the first part, you're going to interact with us, and we're going to start by asking you to share a little bit, but just as a little background, school districts as a whole, and let's just take a district that maybe has 10,000 students in it or more. They can easily receive up to 26,000 inbound inquiries in a school year. Based on your school district size, your number of interactions may be different. You'll have to figure out that ratio, but using the numbers I have there, you should probably be able to figure out what your ratio is based on the size of your students. But 26,000 inbound inquiries on an average 10,000 student school district, that turns into a lot of interactions to keep track of on a daily basis. So we want to hear from you. We want you to share with us just one of those memorable interactions you've had recently with your families, students, or community. You can use the chat. You don't have to come off mute. And you don't have to show me that you're in pajama pants. You don't have to do anything other than open the chat and just share an example of a recent interaction you've had with a family. It can be positive. It can be negative. If you're having a hard time thinking of it, you might want to even put maybe with one of the interactions that one of your colleagues have experienced. Few that we've seen lately is parents reaching out a lot about like holiday breaks and when they start and stop. And sometimes they're happy about those dates and sometimes they're not. Or we see a lot of, our children have experienced something on the playground or bus or in the classroom, and you're trying to navigate a situation very calmly to keep the parent calm and the student calm. But anything that you'd like to share with us, pop it in the chat. And Olivia, if you don't mind, just reading off a few.
Let's give people like extra minute or so, 'cause I found out our chat needed to be enabled, but we're all set now, so we are good to go. So anyone can welcome you to share in the chat that is live now.
Yep. Tell us any recent interactions that you've had with a parent or community member that went really positive or really negative. Extra supports for their children, hosted a project workshop for families. Great to get to know them better and learn about project. Yeah, this is the time of year where we're getting the extra support for children has been huge, right? On what is available. And I think that's one of the biggest advantages for public schools. No matter what the question is, a parent claiming their student was being bullied, I would say that would be number one. Lost their coat, lost their lunchbox. Good, right? And they want you to handle it, right? You're right, had an early coffee with the board members. That could go either way, right? That could be a positive or negative conversation. But as we go to our next slide, I want you to just think about some of the interactions that are being, popping up on the screen as we're talking, and understand that however that experience or interaction ended really drives us to the perception of your school district, right? How that perception is shaped by the experiences that your families have in your district. With so many educational options today, there's so much at stake for school districts, and the perception of your school district is the cornerstone of how a family will process every interaction with you. That's why it is so, so important for you to pay close attention to every single interaction and the experiences that they feel after they leave. I think about all the time Maya Angelou, and that it's the way we make people feel is what they walk away with. So the fact that you have the ability to pay close attention to every experience your families are having in the district really does drive that perception. And let's keep it really real for a minute, right? For most school districts, inbound communications with families is just a huge tangled web. If I was having lunch with all my girlfriends or coffee with that board, we'd call it like a hot mess, right? If we were going to do an informal version of it. Many of the districts really truly find out how their families are feeling. It's usually anecdotal, right? We find out through word of mouth or an email or a phone call we receive, but And the king of kings, social media, right? They start a whole entire Facebook group about a bad or good experience. And mostly they're coming after us for the bad experiences, right? Or answers they couldn't get. And to be honest, our staff, they're just completely overwhelmed with handling these incoming inquiries. You know, not to mention inside this tangled web that we're talking about, it's really hard to know what is the most important amongst that feedback that you're receiving. And you need an easy way to make sense of all the information that's coming your way. Additionally, and more importantly, with so many educational options available, it's incumbent on the district leaders to help, you know, all these families and community members feel secure that public school still remains the greatest choice. So, how do you measure all these perceptions, right, at your school district? Net Promoter Score, or NPS. We talked about that a little in our last webinar. I'm bringing it back in today because today that is our focus, right? That's your starting point. NPS helps you and your district kind of cut through the noise by giving you a clear measurement of your family's perceptions about your district. This way, you can better understand how they feel and what they're really saying about your district when they're not on Facebook and not talking, you know, in their small mom or dad groups. And keep in mind, I know some of you are saying, okay, I wasn't a part of the first webinar. This is the first time I'm hearing about Net Promoter Score, or I was in the first webinar. I remember you mentioning it, Krista. But what does that really mean? So for those of you who are new and others who just want a really good reminder, the Net Promoter Score is a measurement commonly used in private businesses, right, to measure customer experience. So a typical NPS would ask a single question. How likely are you to recommend our company to a friend or colleague, right? So for school districts, this question would look a little bit more like, how likely are you to recommend your school or school district to a family member or to a friend in the community? Now, families can give a score of 0 to 10 depending on their response, right? It'll fall into one of the categories. If they give you a score between 9 and 10, we consider that family a promoter. That means they're typically satisfied, definitely likely to recommend your school or district to others. Then there's the passives, right? They would score you between 7 and 8. Those typically are satisfied, but not enough to quite be a promoter. They could go either way. Then you've got the detractors. Those are your scores of 0 to 6. They typically are completely dissatisfied and highly will not recommend your school or district to others. This NPS is a powerful tool because it gives you insight into the families who are reaching out to your school district and whether they are detractors, passives, or promoters. So now that we've laid the foundation of kind of what NPS is, what our staff is dealing with, right? On average, how many interactions that we are having on a daily basis, depending on what size your school district is. It's my pleasure to hand it over to Dr. Shoulders to share what we've learned about the detractor, the passives, and the promoters, all of those different families in our school district from the report that we just launched in November. Over to you, Kate.
Thank you, Krista. As Krista mentioned, NPS provides you with powerful data about detractors, passives, and promoters in your district. First, let's take a look at families who not only aren't recommending your district, they may be telling their friends about their negative experiences. These are the detractors. The detractor family feels they need to actively pursue information from your district, and they're constantly reaching out for the information they need. In our most recent survey, we actually found that 24% of detractors reported being dissatisfied or very dissatisfied with the quality of their district's communication. That's 22% more families that are unhappy with district communication than with the passive and promoter families. It's also likely that they're not recommending your district to others. And in fact, they're more frequently thinking about leaving your district for other options than other families. Our survey found that for every 1 promoter family considering other educational options, you have 4 detractor families who are thinking about leaving. When asked to give your district a net promoter score, as Krista mentioned, they would give your district a rating between 0 and 6. And not surprisingly, the detractor families have little to no trust in their district. I'd like to show you some key behaviors to help identify detractors in your district. First, families that contact the district more frequently are likely to be detractors. Families that express frustration about their communications with their school or complain about the lack of information they have are also more likely to be detractors. And lastly, detractor families may reach out about the same issues repeatedly as they have trouble knowing where to go for a resolution. Now let's meet the passive family. The passive family tends to be satisfied with the quality of communication in their school district and contact their district less often than detractors. In fact, our survey found 84% felt they received just the right amount of communication from their district. The passive family is likely to quietly recommend the district to friends and family, but not be too vocal about it. They give their district a 7 or an 8 on the Net Promoter Scale. 3/4 of passive families strongly trust their district, with only 2% reporting that they distrust their district. Here's some key behaviors to help identify passive families in your district. They're quiet, but they're satisfied with the communication that they're receiving from you. Essentially, they have no reason to reach out because they feel well informed and able to easily identify and find the information they need. Lastly, let's meet the promoter family. The promoter family is your district champion and brand advocate. In our survey, 89% felt they received just enough communication from their district, and a whopping 96% were satisfied or very satisfied with the quality of that communication. Even when they don't love everything about your district, they trust that you're doing your best. When they are asked if they would recommend their district to others, they'd give a 9 or a 10. And while we know external factors can lead any family to have to consider changing school districts, promoter families are 4 times less likely to consider their other educational options than detractor families. Here are some key behaviors to help you identify promoters in your district. You will hear them speak highly of your district. They're talking about you in a positive way to others and are happy to recommend your district to their friends. They ask few questions as they can easily find any information they need. Now, identifying these families as detractors, passives, and promoters is helpful, but our survey actually unearthed some additional data that can be really insightful in how you can move more families to be promoters. One of our key findings from this report is the correlation between communication quality and NPS. If you take away one thing from this table that you're looking at, let it be this. There are moderate to strong correlations between every statement we asked about communication quality and NPS, for everything from being able to reach the right person, to perceiving information received as helpful, to perceptions of overall customer satisfaction. As an NPS score increases by 1 point, that person's scores on communication quality increase by 1/2 to 3/4 of a point. So if you want more of your families to recommend your district, working on communication quality is a great place to start. Next, we found that families with higher perceptions of customer satisfaction and communication quality are less likely to consider leaving the district and more likely to recommend the district to others. This strong inverse relationship between NPS and considering leaving the district, partnered with the strong positive relationship between NPS and communication quality, are important. The higher the NPS score, the higher the perceptions of communication quality, and the less likely a family is to consider leaving. Finally, and what we see as the biggest opportunity for school districts, is that detractors are reaching out to their district more often than passives or promoters. That means that most days you're talking to more detractors, so you naturally have more opportunities to change their mind about your district. While those interactions may not always start off as positive, how your staff influences their experience is critical. When we examine communication quality, it's not just about the look and feel of your school's newsletter or what's shared on social media. Communication quality is also about that first person who greets a family or answers the phone and the quality of that interaction. So what does this all mean for your district? You have 2 opportunities. First, seek to learn more about your families and what they think about the interactions they have with your district. NPS, as Krista said, is a great place to start. And second, make sure your frontline staff are equipped with the customer service skills they need to manage those interactions with families effectively. So when families are upset, are they being managed in the right way? If not, even by one staff member, are there actions you can take to better ensure your staff are prepared to turn all contacts into positive ones for your families? Now I'd like to hand it back over to Krista to share where we go from here and how your district can use this data.
Thanks, Kate. Super helpful, just giving our attendees today deeper insights into the detractor, passive, and promoter families. NPS is just a powerful tool because it tells us whether or not our families really trust our school district, how they perceive your communication, and how they're talking about your district to others. NPS also tells you as a district leader, administrator, principal, teacher, tells us where to focus all of our energy as a school district. You now have an opportunity to identify the detractors in your district, and you can begin your journey to move from detractors to promoters. And more importantly, keeping your families in your school district. So what's next? A, get involved with learning more about NPS, especially as it pertains to school districts. Download the report and read it. We will share a copy of today's report and the recording from today's presentation after the webinar. Number two, definitely share what you've learned today with your district leaders, colleagues, even across not just your district, but even into other districts, your colleagues across education. Don't be afraid to share it with cabinet members and other district leaders. This is really interesting to read, but not only that, the data that we've gained from this can be used, and then you can help mirror this type of NPS in your own school district. And finally, if you need more support, because one thing we know is you see a webinar like this and you're like, okay, Krista, Kate, we need something like this. What are our next steps? Is there somebody at K-12 Insight who can help guide us to our next step? We'd love to do that. We'd love to meet with you and discuss how you get started. In fact, if you're representing your school district today and believe your district would actually learn more after you share some of this out and you would like our support, Olivia is going to open a poll and you can actually tap right in right there and at least let us know whether or not this is something that you would be interested in learning. We'll give everybody just a few minutes to answer the poll, and you simply saying yes is just for us to get an idea of how many people on this call need this type of support. We won't be sharing out the results for this. However, if you've put that in, we're going to give you two opportunities. You'll see a QR code on the screen that actually lets you put your district information. And that means someone from our research team will actually follow up and contact you to help guide you through the process of what's next and to get you started if you want to get started immediately. We have an entire cohort of our districts that are partners with K-12 Insight that are starting in January. So if that's a timeline that you are really more comfortable with, click that little QR code with your phone. I'll leave it up there for 2 more seconds. You can put your information in there and we'll take it from there.
Right, I think I'll close out the poll.
Great. Okay. And this gives us an opportunity to, if you have any questions after seeing this, if you have any questions, hop right into your chat and put your questions there. We'll give everybody a few minutes. Since they're not popping by screen, Olivia, if you don't mind reading a few, we'll take a few questions that way.
It looks like one just came through. We have a question. How is NPS different from other school surveys?
Dr. Shoulders, we'll have you come off mute.
Sure, thank you. I was going to ask if you wanted me to address that. Our other school surveys that we have are very informative because they collect quite a bit of data from your constituents. That can be staff members, families, communities, and students. And they are really informative. They are more lengthy than NPS. And so typically we offer those surveys and administer those with districts like once a year, sometimes twice a year if they're really zealous about it. But because of that, you collect data annually or biannually. And so you end up making big changes when you see things that you want to take action on. But between those surveys, the NPS pulse allows you to collect data much more frequently. It's one item, one question that your participants can answer, and they can do this as they're leaving your office, as they're walking out of the school. We see this when you're at a stadium for a sporting event or a concert, and you're walking out of the bathroom and they have a little, or airports where they have a little digital screen and you just click a smiley face or a frowny face. That's essentially the same thing. So you get, with this more, you get more responses because it's, folks are interested in, I can do this very quickly as I walk out the door. So you get more information more frequently. And so the changes and action that you're able to take can be a lot smaller in its, in the effort that it takes for you to put it on without having to make a huge effort to do so. So we would actually recommend both, because the NPS you can give very frequently. I see another question on there. How frequently do you suggest? You can do this from selecting a random sample of your parents and families, weekly, every other week. You can have something set up again by the door as people leave your office or as they're leaving the school. There are several different ways that you can give an NPS pulse, but again, this can be as frequently as you would like because it's one question.
And Dr. Shoulders, Laurel had a follow-up. They said, I have read about pulse surveys. Could this be used like that?
Exactly. And that's what we're referring to, that pulse that you can just check very quickly. It doesn't, and this can be something that's more dynamic, where it's not even necessarily you saying, okay, it's Tuesday, we're going to send out the NPS. This can even be as, again, as someone's walking out the door at the end of your phone call. We hear this all the time, right? Would you be willing to stay on the line for a one question survey? This again can be something that's sent automated so that the contacts from families actually drive how often it's given. I do see another question on there. Have you worked with many transportation departments? Krista, would you like me to address that as a member of the research team, or would you like to talk about that?
Why don't you start with research and then I'll share a little bit on the Let's Talk side.
Sure. So Andrew, from the research side, we most frequently work with full districts, and then within those districts, we have sites. And so within every district, we do work with the transportation department. So they collect data from staff members, and then within any department, and oftentimes within a host of departments, we then segment data and provide reports for each site. So we'll have transportation, and then we'll have, for example, early childhood, central office staff, a particular school staff, custodial. So we work with those departments within each district.
And on the Let's Talk side, which is our software that we directly engage with the community, we also have the opportunity at the end of each interaction to be able to get feedback. But we don't just work with transportation, we actually specialize in it and have built out an entire process and workflow for transportation departments to not only collect the data of how we're doing and would you recommend riding the bus with this school district? We've created a way for our districts to be able to ask and create that pulse type survey, that NPS survey for transportation, and all of our districts in that first cohort launch in January. So if you'd like to hear more about what we're doing and what we're building and who we're working with, please follow up with me, and I can not only share some of those districts, but also share some opportunities you can have to use NPS directly in the transportation department.
We had another question come through. How soon can I get started with NPS in my district?
Well, we're hoping that this motivates you to start creating a plan for it now. And the reason is because, as you all know, in March and April, it's a little too late to be able to, gather this type of really rich data and then make an impact before the end of the school year, which is why we're helping to launch our district's NPS the beginning of the year in January. Some of them have already started doing it in the ways that Kate's told you through our research department and our managed projects and managed surveys that we do for our districts, but the opportunities to do it in a software and on the software side of our business is going to be launched in January. So perfect time for a district to get on board right now and also kind of get on the same schedule so that you can not only get feedback in January, but you'd have opportunities as early as March to start really taking some of that feedback and getting those really positive communications back out to your community. right.
Krista, do we want to leave it open for just see if any other questions pop through, and then
Well, I want to encourage everybody who's watching today that even if you have a question now, or if after you've taken the next steps and kind of downloaded everything, shared it out with your school district, and you have questions after that, or you need a member of our team to come do a similar version with a smaller group or with a cabinet level meeting, happy to do that as well. But we're hoping that this just starts the really rich conversations about how important it is to start doing these types of surveys right now, and how important NPS is on really understanding who your community is, what they're saying, and really where do they fall in those categories in the NPS as far as a detractor, a passive, or a promoter. So if you did not get a chance to ask questions today, if you have future questions, use the opportunity, either use the QR code. I know Olivia is also going to put in the chat a way to directly reach out and contact Dr. Kate Shoulders too for any follow-up questions. So either way, we should have you covered. But most of all, I think that we can take this opportunity to thank you just once again for just joining us today. If this QR code is or isn't working, please put it in the chat if you're having any issues with that. And as just a really friendly reminder, we're going to make sure that you receive a copy of not only the recording from today's webinar, but you're going to get an opportunity to download the full report, share with your teams. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you to Dr. Shoulders, and thanks to all of you. We hope you have a wonderful, wonderful rest of the week. And even more importantly, as you start your holiday season, we wish you a safe and happy holiday season. Thanks again for joining.